Hello.
So anyway, welcome to what night of the week are we? We're on Tuesday, I think. I'm disorientated. I'm off to see,
Monday.
not for the first time
Oh,
in
it's
my life, I'm
Tuesday.
off to see The Woman in Black
You're
tonight.
right.
And that is a play, not a woman, obviously. And so looking forward to that. Graham, I'm keenest of all really to know about how your experience was with an English teacher. I mean, my experiences with English teachers were very good. I got decent enough grades in
You
my
don't say
English,
that,
and I
please.
particularly was
I
proud
mean,
of my S level. But what about
experience
your
with
English
an
teacher,
English
Graham?
teacher sounds like,
Can you hear me?
well, this sounds like, the teacher's about to get sacked and put in the sex offenders register. And it's not that sort of thing whatsoever. It's not like some scarring experience in childhood
No,
at
no,
school.
no, no.
When
This.
when I was inducted into the ways of the flesh at the age of 12 by the French mistress. It's not That's not
A
true, by the
Terry
way.
Hall reference. Yes, yes, indeed.
Mm.
So, Graham,
Anyway,
you
yeah,
experienced a different type of English teacher.
English teacher. They're a four-piece band from Leeds,
Yeah,
and they've been bubbling under being played in BBC music. And so I went to see them at the Crescent in York last night, and it came a week after I went to see an older band playing at the Brudenell Social Club in Leeds. And in fact, the Crescent, as you'll know, is actually run by the same people that run the
yes,
Brudenell. So it's quite a similar vibe, old school indie venue with a
yeah.
great bar, not too expensive, really relaxed, slightly scruffy policy about the whole thing. And the week before at Brudenell, I'd seen Nearly Dan, and they're a band who only play Steely Dan songs and have done so for 25 years. So long, in fact, that only the lead singer is actually original. The rest of the band, I think, are all newcomers. And that was like going back to the 70s because the last time I saw them, about 20 years ago, it
Yeah.
was just like watching a band play Steely Dan songs. This time around, to see those songs played by a live band, you understood the mechanics of the songs from the 70s and the difference in how songs were arranged and played. And it was like steeping your head back in a bucket in 1975 or 1974. And it was a totally different world. It was such a loose but well played, slightly cool but knowing vibe. And it was great. Then I was the English teacher, who are much younger and much
Yeah.
more recent in the Crescent. In the Crescent, when I was there, it was like when you and me used to go to loads of gigs in the 80s and 90s. It was like
Yes.
I'd gone back in time to about 1989.
Yeah.
And the band themselves, English teacher, who are signed to Island Records. So they are going to be quite big. And I think the debut album comes
Leeds
out.
Conservatoire, or before it was called the Conservatoire graduates.
Yeah. 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 Well, of course, they were superb musicians. I mean, although they've got a post-punk reputation, they've actually got three songs that are in any way post-punk at all. All the rest is a bit like a less histrionic, over-the-top version of The Last Dinner Party. It's all a bit Kate Bush meets David Bowie, meets a
Oh,
little bit of Yes, meets a little bit of indie guitar band. All really creative, all really rich, and all very quite enjoyable. And so I thought the whole thing was good. It's like one week I'm in the 70s, next week I'm in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was all very good.
now the last dinner party, I guess, are in danger of stealing their thunder, given that they've already won the BBC Introducing award, which is ahead of all the rest of the awards that come their way in the Brits, and that's already been tied up for them. And it's a kind of crowded market that English teacher are in, and I'm not suggesting that their best is already behind them or their best opportunity for success is already behind them. But is there a possibility that they might just get swallowed up by this obsession the media already has with the last dinner party?
It's a change in direction. Although both bands, especially English Teacher, have elements of post-punk, which remains a big thing in a small way on BBC Six Music and amongst live gig goers in the indie scene. They're not really post-punk bands at all. They're really good musicians who play a mix of like prog influenced, slightly over the top, slightly fruity, creative art rock is what they are. And the
Yeah,
difference between Last Dinner Party and English Teacher, both of whom were signed by Island Records,
mm,
was that the Last Dinner Party so far are a bit more in touch with their ABBA side. they really go for big, punchy, bold hook lines with a lot of pizzazz, a bit of glamour, and they all dress in flouncy white dresses. Whereas, so they don't really feel like your typical art rock band whatsoever. Whereas English Teacher look and feel like an indie guitar band that's decided to get into prog rock. So they're not exactly the same, but it could be that this is a new trend. It could be that the post-punk trend, which never sells loads of records. It didn't when it came out in the late 70s with Gang of Four and Delta 5 and the Zebra 6, whatever they're called. It didn't sell loads of records then, but it was always influential. And it won't sell loads of records now, and it won't sell in the future either. So it could be that these are bands who are skillful enough and eclectic enough and smart enough not to let themselves get trapped in post-punk. And it could be that both sell a reasonable amount of records as a result of that.
Mm. And if you've got Island Records behind you, you stand a better chance of doing that. I mean, that's a major level to be giving them the input that's necessary for marketing. And the Last Dinner Party had been well marketed already. They're prominent in media coverage, saturation coverage already for them, which is days perhaps as essential as actually it ever was. It's always been a case of media at the start of a year got behind certain bands and pushed them very strongly.
Yeah. They're a very odd band, though, English Teacher, in the sense that they actually admit that they're influenced by Dali and surrealism, which is your normal approach to want to be, pop stars. So right now, I think Last Dinner Party have got a more chance of being big hits than English Teacher, but it's too early to be definitive, obviously.
And wouldn't that be just so very Leeds as ever? Tantalizingly close, but always ultimately just Leeds.
Leeds never quite bites the apple. Leeds is embarrassed to bite the apple.
So often.
Leeds can see the apple. They've got the teeth to bite the apple. But there's something about Leeds that says, no, we're not going to bite the apple. That's too obvious. If we bite the apple, we'll be as bad as everybody else. So we're going to remain slightly aloof and slightly cool and at a distance from the big shiny apple that we could actually enjoy if we took that final leap.
I quoted in my preview of the concert I think the line from the lead singer, and reveling in the Leeds music scene as being one of the best in the country, which is actually, if Leeds doesn't manage to sometimes burst out and break out of being Leeds, then you might as well enjoy it if you're able to go to Leeds and make the most of it, even if the rest of the country might end up never quite appreciating it in the same way. But there's nothing wrong with that. That actually is one of the great things of being able to go to your local cities and towns to see bands who may or may not go further than that. But the tradition with Leeds is that success comes to very few from Leeds.
Well, it's independent music venue week this week, which BBC Six Music is pushing big time. And I think the BBC Six Music is helped actually create the idea that there is an indie live venue scene. It's always existed, but it's never had a high public profile. And I think it has got a higher profile now, partly because of BBC Six Music. And I think it's time that BBC Six Music, as I've said before, launched its own charts. Because I think it's already halfway to creating a scene, or at least supporting a scene that would benefit from its patronage. And the final step is to have its own chart so that you can judge the success of the acts that it pushes, like which one's actually doing better than other ones. And right now, you haven't got a clue. No. They're all in the same limbo world of relying on the CD sales and vinyl sales because they'll never stream that much. So it could do with a chart.
In terms of how the audience reacted to English Teacher, who describe it also, English Teacher describe it as one of the very, very favourite places to play. What was the reaction to them?
Oh, they went down a storm. But when I say a storm, the young people were mostly at the front. So, there were some people in their 20s. But the further back you got from the front, the fewer there were. So I'd say the average age at the area I was standing in was about 35, 40, which is a little bit older than I thought it was going to be. It seems to me that the indie music scene is sort of surviving partly on old timers.
And that's, that absolutely is the case. And old stages like you and me triumphing the new uprisers, the cheeky monkeys that are coming through. I think it's very important that that's still the case. But ultimately, actually, you do want these kind of venues to be supported by somewhat younger than you and me. I think that's got to be there. There has to be the future generations that actually are still in the habits that we've been in all those years of going to see live shows, any number of nights, any number of bands, and that for that scene to sustain. I mean, it's going to take that. It isn't. It ain't going to just be the old stages that love going out and remembering their younger times and still reveling in live music, which was the kind of experience I had
You're
at
right.
ABC. I went to ABC doing their
Oh, good
orchestral version
grief.
of the Lexicon of Love orchestral
Ooh.
tour, and that was very much
Whereabouts did you go? Where was it?
that was at York Barbican, and on Saturday night.
Oh, yeah.
Utterly glorious
Yeah.
performance, but it was significant that it was well attended by those who would have bought the album when they were much younger, all those 41 into 42 years ago, and who knew every line of all the big hits,
Yeah.
and absolutely reveled in the night. So that's a kind of audience that's there. What one wants to see, obviously, is a younger generation going to gigs and developing that same kind of devotion that's there for bands that keep going, such as ABC, who come back every so often with ventures like this. And then Martin Fry's going to be doing a tour next year, which is coming to Harrogate Theatre Ground.
Oh, yeah. Is he doing a solo tour?
So yeah, he's doing a tour. It's basically a chat and playing tour. So he's going to do acoustic versions of ABC songs, and he's going to talk about his new book that's coming out to coincide with it. I think it's coming out actually later this year, the book, and it's a twofold tour. Well, it's split into two, the tour, between some back end of this year, some next year, which I think from memory Harrogate Theatres during next year. And it's a lexicon of, I think it's called A Lexicon of Life, the book that's going to be coming up. So that's
good title. But I met
excellent title. Yeah.
I met Martin Fry backstage at York Racecourse after a gig in 2012.
Yeah.
And he already looked like his hair was going, and his looks were they weren't quite as glamorous as they were in his heyday in the 80s. What does it look like now?
He looks immaculate. He looks as immaculate as on a front cover of the Lexicon of Love still. Still a sleek hair and slim as anything, and lovely, well cut suit still.
So he wasn't wearing a hat. He wasn't wearing a hat because a hat's always a dead giveaway. You haven't got any hair left.
No, nothing like that. No, well, not unless he'd managed to grow a hair outside a hat. No, definitely not. He looked the dapper chapper as
that's
ever.
Great. It's very hard to be the peak of new romance if you're looking haggard.
No, he did not look haggard at all. He looked absolutely immaculate, and he had, it's interesting, he had a certain moves that reminded me of David Bowie moves from the Let's Dance era, really? not the Ziggy Stardust era of moves, but the way he held the microphone. Yeah, had certain elements of Bowie's minimalist moving phase that Martin did.
Yeah. Well, he probably stole them. Like Mick Jagger used to rip off James Brown in the mid-60s.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all very stylish. We had the kind of crushed velvet curtain at the back, ABC and the familiar 3 stars alongside it, and then this huge orchestra playing. I think more than 35 members, I think, in the orchestra plus.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. This was Anne Dudley's orchestra called the Symphonia, South Bank Symphonia.
Expensive tour. That's an expensive tour to run.
Well, I mean, because South Bank Symphonia would suggest that's London's South Bank, presumably, and with Anne Dudley conducting them, who worked, of course, with Trevor Horn on the original recordings. And there were lots of sort of musicians that looked like they were in their 20s and 30s, and they weren't just, what I love about it, they were actually singing along in bits when they weren't playing, and nodding and head banging almost to certain parts where they weren't playing their violin parts or whatever. You know how much I enjoyed James last year doing their orchestral versions of their songs. And this had that.
You're always mentioning James.
I know, but that was the obvious comparison to make. I can't make the comparison, for example, with the Guildhall Orchestra playing classical songs at the Barbican. It does actually fill out the Barbican stage in a way that is not always possible to do, because it's very much one of those venues that's long and needs bands to make it more than just plain space.
It swallows up bands. Bands become little dots.
Yeah, but you stand a much better chance when you've got 36 musicians playing all at the same time, with Anne Dudley wearing a sparkly, spangly silver jacket, whereas Martin resisted wearing his gold lame number and said it was Anne Dudley who wore a silver version a more frock coat length,
Well,
it must be
he didn't
said.
look like a turkey basting in an oven, probably.
No, Graham, some of the cynical comments you're coming up with tonight, neither he nor she would have looked like that. She definitely did not look like what turkey ready for basting. No,
So
no.
I'm guessing Martin Fry's still quite slim.
Both Anne and Martin. Martin was absolutely as slim as could be. He absolutely still looked the romantic crooner lead, which again, I mean, the other thing it reminded me of is that every song could or should have been a James Bond theme tune. They had that dimension about them. If you then add all the wonderful arrangements that that John Barry would have done for those, it had that feel to it. The drama of a James Bond theme tune.
John Barry was from York anyway, so
John Barry was from York. His first band was in York. Absolutely right. The family was involved in cinema in York, and although he became less enamored of York as he grew older, John Barry, shall we say, it wasn't the place that he wanted to particularly return to in later life. Nevertheless, York claims him in the way that, but I think with rather more justification than with W.H. Auden, who didn't spend very long there, and Frankie Howard, who I think spent, was it 3 months or something, Frankie, before he left York. But if you're born in a city, you can still have a blue plaque here because of your connection. And I'm expecting an adopted Scotsman plaque for you, Graham. You talked about your brown plaques coming up in Harrogate. So
yeah. I think Martin Fry should have a gold plaque.
that would be excellent. So and the way they structured the show, first half greatest hits, second half playing the Lexicon of Love entirely, and I don't blame them for doing this for an encore. What do you think he did for an encore?
Look of Love Again.
Correct, Graham. How do you know that?
It's so obvious, isn't it? I mean, how can you top it?
So you're quite right. He did exactly that.
The second be that.
Love. Yeah.
Well, so he didn't do that many great albums. So they've only got a smaller repertoire to pick from.
Well, sitting here with the following albums by ABC. Number 1, I have got obviously the Lexicon of Love. Number 2, I have Beauty Stab. Number 3, I have to Be a Zillionaire. Number 4, I have Alphabet City. Number 5, I have Up. And then I have a very best of ABC. So that's at least 5 albums there. And they did make an album called Traffic, which actually, if you want to buy the new book, you can get a version of Traffic as well with it. I mean, that's
yeah. But the only classic album was the first one, because Beauty Stab was fairly patchy.
Now, interestingly, he didn't in the first half. He didn't play one song from Beauty Stab, not even the wonderful SOS. And I don't mean the cover version of ABBA's song, but their version of SOS.
No.
That was one of the ones which I thought might have been in there, but wasn't. Well, when I interviewed Martin, I said, "Is actually the Lexicon of Love something of a burden?" He said, "No, it's never been a burden. It's a blessing to have made an album like that."
You're not joking. He couldn't tour otherwise. If they didn't have Lexicon of Love, there's no ABC tour. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, could you make the same argument to some extent with Soft Cells, by far the best album being Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret? Could you make that case?
It's a very 1980s thing. It's a bit like Duran Duran really tour in the back of Rio. That's what they tour on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of classic 80s bands of the New Romantic era who at the time weren't looked on as cool, but now you think they were actually very good. Well, a lot of them just did one classic album, and that's a lot.
I mean, obviously, he's done an orchestral tour before. I think 2014, 2015, maybe. I may have got that wrong. Maybe 2016. Anyway, it led to the Lexicon of Love too. And he back in 2009, he first did an orchestral version with Anne. So I think an artist that takes the care that Martin Fry did to make that show as immaculate as it was. So yes, it's a gem of an album. It was so complete, and even though it was part of a Sheffield scene, in its own way, it was so complete as an album. But to then do it and give it that utter justice in the way that it was done, and beautiful orchestral arrangements by Anne Dudley, which were exquisite. I think that's absolutely fine. We've seen bands go out after all and do these tours where they revisit albums from the past. Echo and the Bunnymen, of course, have done that. Simple Minds have done that. I think doing it this way, which was a little bit different, just expanding it further on there was, of course, pizzicato string arrangements on there, but taking it to this degree was so visually luxurious. It added to what was already a luxurious album. So I think it is worth doing that. I mean, the reality is each band is going to have a best album, aren't they? I mean, obviously it's more debatable what's the best album by the Beatles, what's the best album by
the Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones. It's more difficult, of course it is. What's the best album by Van Morrison? Of course it's more difficult.
Or U2. Best album by U2 is quite tricky as well.
That's quite tricky as well. So, but on the other hand, so if you don't have that luxury, then I think to appreciate your best album in full and to do something with it that's imaginative visually and works musically as well is absolutely justified to do that, I think. And this is what 42 coming. This is the 42nd year since it's 42nd year since that album came out. It came out in June 1982, going straight in at #1.
I think you're right, Charles, but I think we should move out of the past again. We've done A, B, and C. Let's move on to D or E.
Let's go on to D, Graham. What? Right. So what? Right. Okay. So we're going to stretch into D. I'm just looking at what you're wanting to discuss tonight. I'm trying to work out. Right. I've worked out. Okay. Technically, the title of Bill Ryder Jones's new album is Iechyd, and there is a D in Da.
Iechyd. So Da's got a D.
It's the Welsh word, Iechyd.
Yeah. Well,
should have known that. I only went to Cardiff University, and we did used to say.
Yeah. That was a long time ago, Charles.
That's why it's one of those ones that's escaped the memory. However, you are suggesting that Bill Ryder Jones, who I'm going to go and see in Leeds, by the way, on March, I think 13th, I think it is, on this album tour. They are. I'm going to Robert Beaumont. I'm Robert's
which venue?
Guest. I think we're going to the Brudenell. I think we're going to the Brudenell.
Oh yeah, excellent. We know he's
Bill Ryder Jones, Leeds Brudenell Social Club on the 13th.
That should be good because he's Liverpudlian. Obviously, he was in the choral in 2008. He joined as a teenager, about 14 years old.
Yeah,
he was the guitarist and a bit of a songwriter, and he left in 2008 and has been solo ever since. And he's always been a bit, either a bit sort of like slightly miserable, melancholic, semi-acoustic, or slightly miserable, melancholic, grungy pop rock. So I've never massively liked what he'd done up to now. But Iechyd, which obviously is a Welsh phrase, and he was so worried about using it, he actually rang up Gruff Rhys to actually ask him permission, because obviously he's a Welshman. To say, if I use this word, I know it's a Welsh word and I'm not Welsh, but is it okay? So he got Gruff Rhys's permission.
What's the greeting? It's just a greeting, isn't it, Iechyd?
Yes, it's quite a pleasant greeting.
Yeah, it's not an insult one, is it?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Yeah, it's not a hidden swear word. It's not like a up yours in Welsh. This album's this album's a massive step forward. I mean, it's still melancholic in a lot of places, although there's a few sort of pleasant, upbeat numbers, which is good to hear. But it's just a massive step forward from before, because this is a man who's had a lot of drinking, drugs problems and mental health problems. So he knows what depression is. But this album is a beautiful thing, and there's a bit of sort of toe tapping, pastoral, very mild psychedelia, almost in the choral way. But there's a lot of gorgeous piano-led ballads with like string sections, and then there's a few big, belting, soaring orchestral ballads with a sort of like magical fairy tale leaning to them, very much in the style of both Flaming Lips and Mercury Rev in the late 90s, when Mercury Rev did Deserter songs and Flaming Lips did the Soft Bulletin. That sort of sweeping, grand, eloquent statement.
So different than from Joe Boyd directing string arrangements for Nick Drake on similarly melancholic material.
Yeah, there are some numbers which are a bit more subtle like that, but there's a lot of push, a lot of passion in it. And there's one track called "This Can't Go On," and it's instantaneously likable. Straight away this is a great soaring ballad in the sort of style of "The Air That I Breathe" by the Hollies in the 1970s, or "The Drugs Don't Work" by the Verve in the 1990s. Straight away when you hear it, this is a great track, and "This Can't Go On" Iechyd is just a great track. And it's really pleasing to see him do something so brilliant. But there's still a lot of sadness to it. He sounds a bit like a man who was all at sea. Although he's back on dry land, he can't quite shake off that feeling of being all at sea. Yeah. And I didn't understand it till I read something in our favorite old man's Bible, Mojo magazine. And it turns out, and this is shocking, When he was 7 years old, he watched as his 9-year-old brother fell off a cliff and died. I mean, no wonder he's got mental health issues, and he can handle melancholia really well in music because he's got a very good reason to do so.
Graham,
So that was quite
is that something that's only recently come out really about Bill?
I wouldn't have thought so. It's just that, as you know, the whole world will. When I say the whole world, I mean particularly Britain. Britain's become now obsessed that everybody has to have some sort of mental health issue. So
Yeah.
everybody's now feeling really free to talk about it. But also the media has also become more and more confident about bringing up mental health issues. In Mojo, being the old timers music magazine of long-standing and very high quality, it's finally grasped the nettle, and it's a bit more likely to bring up mental health issues than it was before, when it was totally obsessed with what was the B-side of that single and which studio was that album recorded in. So I think it's not been a secret, but it's not been played on by anybody.
It was watching Traitors, which I don't know if you did watch. Very much part of that program was mental health journeys. When they were doing sort of interviews to camera, they would talk about what experiences they'd been through, and there seemed to be that they all had to have some kind of mental health arc that they'd been through, which Traitors was going to take them to some kind of clarification about themselves and some new nirvana for themselves. And I hadn't sort of thought of it in those terms before, Graham, but actually it's a very interesting point, the mental health journeys and the need to talk about them, and indeed not somehow things being incomplete unless you can actually have such a discussion and make it. I'm not saying make a claim in a way that's fake or false, but the reality is that maybe actually in life, the reality is that mental health is something that is almost beyond our control in some ways. And I think, some people are more drawn to melancholia, some people are struggle, but the reality is that mental health throughout life is somewhat unpredictable, and often creative people are those more likely to be mentally fragile in some way, more sensitive to things, more able to react in a creative way, but not necessarily understanding themselves completely,
Yeah, but I think what's changed though is that Nick Drake was obviously melancholic and eventually very sadly killed himself.
But no one picked up on it, Graham. No one picked up on that at the time.
Well, that's because the songs are works of observation and contemplation. He's not talking about his own melancholy. He's not talking about his own depression. He's got those emotions inside the songs, but the songs aren't just, I'm feeling depressed, I'm melancholic.
Ian Curtis with Joy Division, where the rest of the band would say,
thing. He was into Kafka and J.G. Ballard.
Yes,
so even though you can tell that he's depressed by the songs,
but the rest of the band, who were young lads, said they didn't pick up on it. They just didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, but they came from an era where if you had something wrong, you didn't talk about it anyway. So
that's my point, Graham. That's where it's changed. I think now they would. And it's very interesting that people step out from what they're doing to say, you know what, I can't cope at the moment. I need to sort myself out. Even someone who's seen as a tough guy in rugby, the tough guy of rugby is England's Fly Half Farrell taking time out.
I do not see what that's going to do with art. I'm perfectly happy for people to discuss mental health issues and to share their experiences and problems. But the end goal of art should be art. It's not a therapy session.
But don't you think some people are now using it as that?
The only band that could use it as therapy. The only band that could use it as a therapy session were called Therapy.
I think if we look at the way that James Arthur talks about his situation, Lewis Capaldi, it's been very much strongly covered about what he's been through. It seems to be a very different era now for that, and it's not seen as a sign that's where it's changed. It's very, very different from the natural British reserve of trying to make the best of things.
But I see a distinction between how you behave in your life, i.e. sharing is a good idea, tackling your mental health issues is a good idea, and the art that's produced by artists, by musicians, by painters, by writers, by filmmakers. I don't want a whole succession of people rabbiting on about their own personal problems with no artistic side to it. you have to take your experiences and make them something better, make them something interesting, make them beyond a confession. A confession on its own only goes so far.
Yeah, Graham, I would agree with that, and I do think that is one of the what you're looking for, is, well, as ever, is a path out of it, if you like, but and some form of inspiration, some form of hope as well, and some form of sensitive analysis of it, and being able to express it in a way that others can't. That's what art invariably does. It transcends the more mundane way of that we might discuss things, or even going to a psychiatrist about it. Art lifts, transcends, takes things higher and further. That's its role.
You're right. And having agreed with you, we need to move on.
Yeah, no, we've got two possible subjects tonight, Graham. Shall we do Rory Stewart tonight, or which I'm rather keen to do? Today I was listening to the rest of politics. Still there, Graham?
Politics on the Edge by Rory Stewart, which came out last year in hardback, called A Memoir from Within. It's published by Jonathan Cape. It's a bloody good book. It's one of the best books about politics written from inside I've ever read. And I'm sure it stands up well against any previous book by people whose books I haven't read either.
Nadine Dorries, for example.
Well, exactly, because I know no one's a fully reliable commentator, but if you want to hear what it was like to be in the Cameron Osborne government, then the May government, and then a bit the Boris government, you're going to hear it best from him, because no one's right the whole time. No one's perfect, but he's a very intelligent, thoughtful chap with a lot of different interests, and he likes to be fair to everybody where he possibly can be fair. He doesn't even name politicians the whole time. He says that if a politician has got an interest in an anecdote that I experienced myself, but he doesn't deserve to be made a fool of or made to look bad, I'm going to write about him, what happened, without naming the politician. So he only names the politicians when it either isn't a huge embarrassment, or where he thinks they've earned the disgrace of being named in public. So he does not rate David Cameron. I'm only on page 70, and it's already clear he does not rate David Cameron whatsoever.
He certainly doesn't rate Boris Johnson. Listening to the rest of his politics, he definitely doesn't.
I haven't got to that bit yet, but I'm sure he liked Boris Johnson even less than he liked David Cameron, because he's an old school
point, Graham. That point you make about fairness, because I mean, my defining moment of Rory Stewart would have been the night in front of the cameras when the Tory candidates for leadership were making their pitch, and he describes it as a catastrophe, his attempt to become the Conservative Party leader. But when I watched him in that moment, it was a man who had a sense of fairness, knowing that fairness was not going to be playing out remotely, that he stood no chance against the Johnson whirlwind, which did not involve fairness, did not involve cleanness, fair tactics at all. And in many ways, Rory is simply, I think, too fair-minded to take the lethal version of politics that gets you to the top. He's not that kind of player. He's always, even he was always a commentator even then. Watching him in action.
But he's not. Yeah, but he's also a doer. He's a man of his word who does.
You're right, Graham. Yeah. He's got a track record of getting things done. I agree. He's a wonderful talker, but actually, if you look at his track record, you're right. He's always got things done, which comes from the way he was brought up, the world that took him into. A man of action as much as reaction to what's going on. Yes,
he's also a natural underdog. He likes to be the underdog. He likes to be the slight outsider,
and that's why it didn't suit him. That's why that television moment didn't suit him.
But also, he keeps on singing along how he didn't fit in, how it was all alien to him, the way that other politicians behaved. They were all obsessed with their own standing and by gossip about politics and promotion and rivalry. Nothing about the policy. He said he didn't meet anybody hardly, apart from Ken Clark, who was actually interested in anything that actually mattered to anybody.
Yeah.
But he himself ended up, when he was an MP, he was made Secretary of State for National. He was made a prisons minister. He was made Minister for Africa. He was chair of the Defence Committee. So the underdog who complained he didn't fit in, he actually got not the top jobs. He didn't get the key cabinet positions, but he had quite a lot of senior posts for a man who didn't fit in and spoke his mind and was the underdog. And that's slightly strange, because the way he's talking early in the book, you would have thought he would end up just as a backbencher, but there clearly was room in the Commons, no matter how bad it was. For Rory to, if not, prosper, he'd be certainly, reasonably successful, I think. So I think he's exaggerating how bad it is because he's such a principled man that seeing the real world and being in the midst of it just overwhelms his sense of fairness, and he just can't handle it at all.
We're into the last 90 seconds, Graham, and the question that you wanted to analyse and to do this in 90 seconds is quite some achievement. Is his damning view of Westminster politics under his own party's rule since 2010 wholly justified? And you're putting a question mark about that.
Well, yeah, if you look back at previous parliaments, previous prime ministers, going all the way back to the 19th century, when was there a perfect parliament full of perfect MPs and perfect prime ministers? When were there politicians who didn't give a damn who got anywhere, who didn't give a damn about politics, who got anywhere, who said their piece, spoke straight, told the truth, cared about everything? When did that ever happen? It never really happened. The only difference is that Cameron's team, which he analyses very well early on, were full of old Etonian chums and very young political advisors who'd grown up with Cameron in the 5 years before he was nearly elected prime minister. So it was a very closed house of people who weren't interested in the real reality of politics. They were just interested in playing the game and winning the game. And that's probably what's changed. But the idea that Parliament was great in the past is I think a bit spurious.
Politics will always be flawed. It is impossible not to be flawed. There cannot be a perfect politics. There cannot be a perfect way of running anything. It will never happen. Also, it will never happen.
Well, to take the politics out of politics is like taking the football out of football.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.